And we are live. We are live. Ian, don't forget to screen share. Welcome. This is Conspiracy or Not, and here is our intro. All right, we are live. This is Conspiracy or Not. Here we come. It is Friday, March 31st, and look, everyone, look who we have. We have Michael Cremo. As always, I'm Aaron, and I'm joined with Ian and Amy. Hello, Michael Cremo. Thank you for being here.
Good to be with you and all your viewers.
Welcome, Michael.
Hello,
Thanks
Ian, Amy, and everyone.
Hi, guys. How are you this week?
Okay, so let me see. I just want to run over a quick bio for our guest here before we get started, and then I'll let him fill in any blanks. And I just want to be brief about this. Michael Cremo is a member of the World Archeological Congress and the European Association of Archaeologists, as well as an associate member of the Bhaktivedanta Institute, specializing in history and philosophy of science. Michael Cremo, also known by his devotional name Drutakarmā, dāsa, is an American freelance researcher who identifies himself as a Vedic creationist and an alternative archaeologist, and argues that humans have lived on this earth for millions of years in cases of artifacts allegedly found in the Eocene auriferous gravels of Table Mountain, California, and discussed in his book, Forbidden Archaeology. Dr. Cremo, Michael Cremo, would you like to just fill in any blanks and let us know exactly who you are and what you're about, and just take your bio from here and tell us about yourself briefly?
Well, I was born in 1948, so I've been around a while. My father was an intelligence officer in the United States Air Force, so that meant a couple of things for me as I was growing up. For one thing, it meant I was moving around to a lot of different places, and I got exposed to a lot of different worldviews and cultures. I could see there's more than one way to look at things. And one of the worldviews and cultures that I got exposed to was the ancient spiritual culture of India. And eventually I became the disciple of a guru from India, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And as part of my practice, I studied the ancient Sanskrit writings of India. There's one group of them called the Puranas, which are the histories. And in them, I learned things that were quite different from the things that I learned from my teachers in high school and university. I learned that there has been a human presence on this planet going back many millions of years, tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of years. According to what I learned from my teachers, humans like us have only been around less than 200,000 years. So I began to wonder, is there any evidence for that? Or for the accounts of extreme human antiquity that I found in the ancient Sanskrit writings of India, or whether I should just accept it as some kind of mythological kind of observation. So that's what got me looking into the history of archaeology. And there again, I was influenced by my family background. As I said, my father was in one of the intelligence services, and I grew up among people in the diplomatic service, the military, the intelligence services. So I could understand there is such a thing as hidden knowledge. There are facts about the world which many people are simply not aware of because they don't have access to this information. So when I started looking for archaeological evidence for extreme human antiquity, I understood I would have to look beyond the textbooks, because what I found when I looked at the textbooks of archaeology was only the evidence that goes along with the current dominant view in the scientific community that humans like us have only been present for 200,000 years. Before that, they would say there were no humans like us. So I didn't look just in the textbooks. I started looking into the original scientific reports by archaeologists, paleontologists, geologists, other scientists who are digging into the earth. And when I did that, not just in the English language, but in German, French, Italian, Spanish, I have a reading knowledge of most of the major European languages. When I started looking into these original scientific reports from the 19th century up to the present, I found many reports of scientists discovering human bones, human artifacts, human footprints going back much further than 200,000 years, in some cases many millions of years old. And I collected all of those reports in a book, Forbidden Archaeology. I've written many books, but Forbidden Archaeology is the one for which I'm best known. It's a 900-page collection of these archaeological discoveries of evidence for extreme human antiquity. And I called the book Forbidden Archaeology because although these facts are reported in the original scientific literature, they don't make their way into today's textbooks because of what I call a process of knowledge filtration that operates in the world of science. So that book, Forbidden Archaeology, was published in 1993. And after it was published, I started speaking about the subject matter at major international scientific conferences, at universities around the world, and also to groups of people interested in alternative science. I notice you have the word conspiracy in the name for your show, people interested in conspiracy theories, UFOs, things like that. So that's kind of a brief introduction about
we do have,
where
we do have the name.
In your abstract from your Forbidden Archaeology book itself, you had an interview with Rob McConnell, which I enjoyed watching there. You mentioned that many scientists have forgotten or ignored these remarkable facts about these bones, footprints, artifacts, showing that they could be up to many million years old. What do you think is the main reason why they would ignore these facts? What do you think of that?
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons for it. In one sense, it's just human nature. For example, if I love somebody and then somebody tells me something bad about the person I love, I don't want to believe it. I won't accept it. I may even become a little bit angry at the person who tells me because I'm just so attached to that person. So in the same way, many scientists are very much attached or in love with the current Darwinian theories of human origins. And therefore, when they hear something that radically contradicts the theory that they are so attached to, they become offended in some way, or they find the evidence that contradicts their theory very hard to believe, very hard to accept. I think there's deeper...
Like a religion, right?
Yes.
Religious science into religion.
Something like that. And then there's deeper reasons. The process of knowledge filtration operates because those who support the current dominant theories have been given a government-enforced monopoly in the education system, so that only their ideas can be taught. Alternatives are not mentioned, or if they are mentioned, they're mentioned in an extremely prejudicial, negative way. So that a person who is going through that education system with the goal of eventually becoming an archaeologist or some other scientist dealing with human origins hears only one idea. And this has the effect of marginalizing and delegitimizing other ideas that may be present even among scientists. There are scientists who are proposing alternatives to the current theories. They're very much in the minority. But generally, in countries that consider themselves free and democratic, minorities have rights. Just because you're in the majority doesn't mean you can impose your view on everyone else. For example, in terms of religion, for example, the United States is a majority Christian country, but we wouldn't tolerate the government giving Christians, or even one sect of Christians, an absolute monopoly in the education system, so that if we were reading a textbook about the history of the United States, they could say only Christianity should be mentioned, no other religion should be mentioned, even though representatives of these different faiths and atheists and others have always been present in the United States from its very founding. So we wouldn't really tolerate that. But at the present moment, we're tolerating the government giving an absolute monopoly in the education system to this group of scientists who are in a majority at the present moment. So a person going through that education system where all other views are either not mentioned or are marginalized and delegitimized is going to have a very strong tendency to reject, forget, or otherwise set aside evidence that contradicts the theory that they've been taught is the only legitimate one. And deeper than that, I think it has something to do with power. There are different kinds of power in the world. There's political power, there's military power, there's economic power. There's also intellectual power, which is a very subtle one, but it's a very real power. Mm-hmm. If you can dictate to people their sense of identity, mm-hmm. which you can do through defining humans as evolved apes as purely material machines. Then what you do is you create their sense of identity, and from that automatically come goals, values, objectives, and activities. So people who have monopoly power don't like to give it up very easily. So scientists who now have this monopoly power, which gives them the ability to dictate to people their sense of identity, and naturally, as a result of that, their goals, values, and objectives, they have a very strong motivation to keep their position of monopoly power. And what this enables them to do is by, most of the supporters of the current theories about human origins define us as machines made of molecules in competition with each other for survival. Mm-hmm. And that has the effect of introducing into people's minds the idea that purely materialistic goals should be the main purpose of human life. To produce and consume more and more material things is the main purpose of human life. And we should do that in competing groups. And if we do that, then what we find is that tremendous amounts of wealth are generated,
right,
but that wealth flows in unfair ways into the pockets of those who are controlling this system. Right. And so I think that's the ultimate reason why there's such resistance to evidence that would result in people having a different conception of who they are and where they came from, a different concept of identity. Say, as I believe, we're not just machines made of molecules in competition with each other for survival. We're all beings of pure consciousness. I'm a being of pure consciousness. You're a being of pure consciousness. We're all beings of pure consciousness. No need to divide ourselves into competing groups. Let's figure out ways to satisfy our material needs in the most simple, natural, fair, equitable, and efficient way possible, while putting most of our human energy into developing the resource of consciousness. If we were doing that, that would cause shockwaves through all the currently dominant political institutions,
absolutely,
economic institutions, financial institutions. It's all based on keeping people thinking that my main purpose in life is simply to be a good producer and consumer of material things in competition with others.
And that would all come together with the spiritual battle that we face against the controllers.
Yeah, and therein lies the conspiracy.
That is how I look at it.
Now, we are a conspiracy-minded group around here, as you pointed out. The words conspiracy is in the title of our show here. We chose the title "Conspiracy or Not." Here we come, fairly carefully, including the concept that not everything is a conspiracy, and whether it is or not, we're here to figure it out and talk about it and share it as best we can.
That's a good. I agree with that kind of outlook. Sure.
We just recently, just a couple of weeks, what was it, two weeks ago, we had our 33rd show, and it's not uncommon for us to discuss the Freemasons, right, the Masonic lodges, and the number 33 is extremely important to them. And on that note, considering what you do, I wanted to ask you your opinion or your knowledge on perhaps what might actually be the original or true purpose behind the Smithsonian Institution, which was actually started by a man named James Smithson, who turns out was Ian. Do you have that page up? What he was a part of the Grand Lodge of
Smithson was 1765 to 1829. He was an English scientist who conducted research in chemistry, mineralogy, and geology. Smithson spent much of his life in Europe. He is remembered for providing the means to establish the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. This is from a Grand Lodge of British Columbia and Yukon website. So he was a Freemason with this Grand Lodge.
So he was a Freemason, part of this Grand Lodge in Canada, and therein lies yet another conspiracy. And now you often speak about anomalous discoveries and institutions and the hierarchy among the archaeological community, like the Smithsonian Institute and the government archaeologists, the government-sponsored archaeologists, who would show up and confiscate these artifacts, and never to be seen again, swearing, people to secrecy and, on the site. So what is your opinion, or what is your knowledge on this that we've just put forward to you?
Well, I'm not a Freemason and I'm not an expert on it, but I can say some things from my study of the history of archaeology about persons connected with the Smithsonian Institution. I mean, one of my favorite cases of archaeological evidence for extreme human antiquity is the California gold mine discoveries. In the middle of the 19th century, gold was discovered in California, and miners came there to get the gold. And to get the gold, they were digging tunnels into the sides of mountains like Table Mountain in Tuolumne County in the Sierra Nevada mountains near the town of Sonora. And deep inside these tunnels, the miners were finding human bones and human artifacts. And what makes these discoveries so interesting to me is that they were found in layers of solid rock that modern geologists say are about 50 million years old. And for most archaeologists today, that's beyond imagination. As I said, most archaeologists today believe humans like us first came into existence less than 200,000 years ago. So these discoveries came to the attention of Dr. J.D. Whitney, who was the chief government geologist of California, and he collected these artifacts. He visited the sites. He interviewed the discoverers of these objects, and he wrote a massive book about them that was published by Harvard University in the year 1880. But we don't hear very much about these discoveries today because of the process of knowledge filtration. And the scientist who was most responsible for the knowledge filtering in this particular case was a scientist from the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., and his name was William Holmes. He was an anthropologist working at the Smithsonian Institution, and he regarded himself in a superior position to Dr. Whitney, who was just a geologist working out there in the provinces, you could say. So from his position of authority at the Smithsonian Institution, he pronounced, if Dr. Whitney had understood the theory of human evolution, he wouldn't have published those findings. He wouldn't have come to those conclusions that he did. In other words, if the facts didn't support the dominant theory, the theory supported by the Smithsonian Institution, then those facts had to be forgotten. They should be cast into oblivion, which is basically what happened. However, from my research, I learned that some of the artifacts from the California gold mines are still in the collection of the Museum of Anthropology at the University of California at Berkeley. I mean, some years ago, this was many years ago, but in 1996, I was a consultant for a documentary that aired on NBC. It was called The Mysterious Origins of Man. It was produced by a filmmaker named Bill Coty. And he got in touch with me, and he was looking for cases that he could include in this documentary, where he was willing to explore the alternative ideas about human origins in antiquity. And I told him he should go to that museum at the University of California at Berkeley. He did that, but the museum officials refused to give him permission to see or film those artifacts. However, we did have some pictures that were included in Dr. Whitney's publication from the 19th century. So he did wind up with some imagery that he could use in this documentary, which included some examples from my work, but the work of others in the alternative history field as well. When scientists in the United States found out that NBC was going to broadcast this documentary, they tried to stop NBC from doing it. But they weren't successful. NBC did show it, but then these scientists went to the Federal Communications Commission and they made a request for the FCC to investigate NBC, censure NBC, fine NBC for having shown this documentary, which was called The Mysterious Origins of Man. Now, I'm happy to say they weren't successful, but it just kind of shows the lengths to which some of these scientists who are part of these establishment institutions will go to prevent information about alternative ideas from getting out. Now, later, I went to the museum myself. As I said, they didn't allow Bill Coty, the television producer, to see these artifacts. But as you mentioned in your introduction, I'm a member of the World Archeological Congress, which is one of the world's largest international organizations of archaeologists. And they hold a conference every 4 years. So I decided that at one of these conferences, I would propose to present a paper about these California gold mine discoveries. And that proposal was accepted by the Academic Review Committee of the World Archeological Congress. So with that letter in hand, I was able to go to the officials at the museum at the University of California at Berkeley, the Anthropology Museum, and they did give me permission to see and photograph some of the artifacts from the California gold mines. They're not kept in the museum itself. They're kept in a building a few miles from the museum. But, I was able to see them finally. But an ordinary person would find that very difficult to do. First of all, you wouldn't even know they were there. And if you did know, you wouldn't know all the bureaucratic procedures that you've got to go through to get clearance to see these things.
So do you find it odd that the scientists would go to such extent to contact the FCC? Does that not sound a little bit above and beyond what a scientist would do? Someone who considers themselves open-minded, who abides by the scientific method, who follows the evidence where the evidence leads them, rather than, as you have often stated through your explanation of the knowledge filtration process, doesn't it seem a little bit more than just, scientists trying to hold on to their dogma? Doesn't it? I mean, honestly, doesn't it seem like there's really something else going on? And
Yes.
Before you answer, I'm sorry. Before you answer, you often speak about consciousnesses, which is really what I love about your talks and your interviews. We often, on this show, try to touch on consciousness. We explore many rabbit holes, and I often say at the bottom of every rabbit hole, the common denominator on all these conspiracies that we explore is consciousness. It seems that is really what is being hidden from humanity. I mean, don't you find it really a little bit odd that the scientists, quote, scientists, would go to such extent to shut down your talks, your lectures, your documentaries?
Yeah. Now, I would point out that this case I was talking to you was some years ago. This documentary aired in 1996. And at that time, there were fewer media channels. Now people can go on television, on the web. There's hundreds of web TV channels. There's hundreds of cable TV channels. But at that time, basically you had the three major networks plus PBS. So there were fewer channels of information. And at that time, scientists were very much in control of not only the education system, the formal education system, but they were also pretty much in control of what got aired on the television channels, because there were fewer of them and they were easier to control. And they were very much surprised when NBC dared to air this documentary, The Mysterious Origins of Man. It was a big surprise to them. They weren't used to things like that happening in the media world, so they were very upset by it. And I think they felt justified in going to the FCC. And if anybody wants to see the documentation on this, they can have a look at my book, Forbidden Archaeology's Impact, where I document the emails and the correspondence to the FCC, the attempts to boycott NBC and all of that. But as I would point out, that was a different era in our media history. Now there are just so many channels and ways that people can get information. I think the mainstream scientific community has kind of given up on their efforts to try to control and censor all of the different media channels that are available to people these days. I mean, in recent years, you had the History Channel airing the series Ancient Aliens. 20 years ago, you wouldn't have seen anything like that on a mainstream media outlet. So I think scientists have given up trying to control everything that comes out on all the media channels. Where they are trying to hold the line is in the public tax-supported education systems around the world, where the next generation of scientists is being trained. So, yes. But I think you're also right about this whole question of consciousness. And I think that is the key issue. And I think it's the ultimate reason why there's so much resistance to alternative ideas about human origins, because most of the alternatives to the current theories, which are extremely matter-centered, the alternative theories are usually conscious-centered. When I wrote my book, Forbidden Archaeology, and it got out there and people started reading it, people would often ask me, well, you've got all of this archaeological evidence that contradicts the now dominant theories of human origins. So what are you proposing as an alternative? So to answer that question, I wrote another book called Human Devolution, a Vedic alternative to Darwin's theory. And in that book, I said, before we even ask the question, where did human beings come from? We should first of all ask the question, what is a human being? And as I mentioned a little earlier, most scientists today are going to say, we're just machines made of molecules in competition with each other for survival. And as far as consciousness is concerned, they would say, well, that's just a temporary byproduct of chemicals interacting in the brain. And at the time of death, when the chemicals stop interacting with each other, there's no more consciousness. So they have a purely materialistic conception of who we are as conscious beings. They would say matter produces consciousness, but only temporarily. What I'm proposing is that consciousness has its own independent existence apart from matter. Consciousness isn't produced by matter, but consciousness can come in contact with matter and be covered by it. And the real purpose of human life is to uncover consciousness from its material coverings. And if you had a civilization based on that, it would be quite different than the civilization that we see today.
You were asked once, why are we here? And pardon me while I get my reading glasses out. You were asked once, why were we here? I found your answer to be most intriguing. You said, and I actually wrote down the majority of this as a quote here, you said that we're not fit. If we're here, that it means that we're not fit to exist on that higher level of reality that you call pure consciousness or a realm, and that the ruling principle of that realm is loving harmony among all conscious beings and the source of all consciousness. And when the conscious self becomes egotistical, domineering, controlling, selfish, then it can no longer exist in that harmonious state, and that there must be some other place for such consciousnesses to exist, and that we're here to find ourselves, and now we have a choice. So would you like to expand on that, perhaps? Or, I mean,
well,
I found that to be a deeply profound statement, and those are your words, so good on you.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I did say it. But because people do ask that question, but I think the important thing is the choice that we now have. We can either pursue the project of trying to dominate, control, and exploit others and exploit the resources of matter. And if we keep going down that road, I think all of the problems that we now see around us, the destruction of our environment, the intense levels of conflict that we see on all levels of human society, are only going to get worse. But if we take the other path and understand we're not machines made of matter in competition with each other for survival, but we are really, each of us, beings of pure consciousness, and we're all related on that level. There's no use in dividing ourselves into so many competing groups. We should try to work together to find ways to satisfy our material needs in the most simple, natural, efficient, fair, and equitable way possible, while putting most of our human energy into developing that resource of consciousness and making progress towards going back to what I call that level of pure consciousness, which is beyond the whole artificial reality system that we're in now. I very much like the films that came out a few years ago, The Matrix and things like that, which had this idea that we are in an artificial reality. We're not in the real world.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It sounds very much like my work would probably mesh with that quite well, because once you eliminate the competition, the money, the politics and all of that, you wind up with something where consciousness can develop unhindered, unbound.
Well, that would result in a reduction of the gross national product. So,
well, the thing is, if you no
so
longer
there'd be
have,
some resistance.
Oh, well, definitely there's resistance, but once you have, I mean, money, all money is accounting for human energy added into the system that accounts for human energy added. I mean, that's all it is, really. I mean, yes, it has some uses that it can be put to motivate people and so on and so forth. But, you know, money is, money is just an accounting device for our energy added. And as long as we have to account for our energy to another to survive, we are not free. Right?
Absolutely. And
So,
there are different kinds of money systems too.
if you add free energy, accounting for human energy becomes rather moot, right?
I would guess so.
It becomes kind of pointless. It becomes like accounting for grains of sand. So, you know, in my estimation, if we can stop this accounting for our energy, and we have game changers in today's technology, where if we have work we need done that no one wants to do, we can set a robot to do that work, right? And this would allow us to pursue our bliss.
Pursue the avenue of exploring our consciousness, which is,
yes, which is in essence our bliss, right?
The way our system is set up with the price of oil, the price of gas, the price of energy, electricity, the price of groceries, the lower and lower and lower wages that people have to put up with and acquire additional jobs. It leaves people tired and without any time left. And I've often said to people that if we didn't have this system that we're in, that we wouldn't have to work 2 jobs. We would have free time on our hands. And what do you think people would do? They would tinker in their garages. They would build things. They would experiment with conscious experiments like some people have done. There have been experiments where group meditation has shown to lower the crime rate in certain areas. And so, I mean, this is really, truly at the heart of virtually every conspiracy, is the fact that we are probably not supposed to know who we are, where we come from, and our connection to each other and the whole universe as a whole.
Exactly.
Well, that takes me back to where they're trying to keep us from as far away from God as possible, because these people are anti-God. They do everything, you know, ungodly, right? So they want to drive us farther and farther away, which to me is true consciousness, right? Knowing and being with God is true consciousness to me.
Yeah, I think.
Without getting too religious, right?
Right. I mean, you're using the word God. You could also use the word soul. But I find, you know, in my presentations, I use terms like conscious self, because
that's hard to deny.
Because if you say the word soul to some people, they think, okay, that's something religious. It's something that requires faith and belief. But if you use the word conscious self, everybody's conscious, everybody's a self, everybody's a person. It's our most immediate experience. It's something you can't really deny. Or if you use the word God, then again, sometimes people think, okay, now you're talking about religion, and that requires faith and belief, and I'm not there. But if you say source of all conscious beings, then it becomes more relatable because we're conscious beings. It's normal
regardless
to think
of what imaginary
related.
man you believe in, we are in fact all conscious beings, certainly.
And there might be a sort of
connection, right?
So, so Michael, you're as an ardent student of the Sanskrit writings, you often speak about consciousness in many of your lectures and interviews. Have you personally had any experience on a personal level of anything like? I imagine you probably do some meditation. Have you ever had personal experience with astral traveling or remote viewing of any kind? Anything on a personal level?
Yeah, I've had several experiences. Once I had an out-of-body experience. Now, this was when I was young, when I was in my early 20s. I was in the United States Navy, and I was stationed in Iceland. A lot of people were getting sent to Vietnam. I got sent to Iceland. And I wound up with lots of time on my hands. So once some friends of mine and we went camping in the mountains of Iceland in the winter time. And, we were camped at the base of this mountain. It's not like a huge mountain like Mount Everest or something like that, but, a few thousand feet tall. And we had this idea to have a race to the top of it. So we were climbing up the side of this mountain, and I was actually winning the race, and I almost got right up to the top. And I slipped and I fell, and I started going down the mountain on the ice and snow on my back with my head pointed down. Oh. And I was trying to dig in my heels, do everything possible I could to stop. And I was going faster and faster down the slope of the mountain. I was thinking of all the sharp rocks I climbed over. I was thinking at any moment my head's going to smash into one of those rocks and it's going to be all over. Or I thought of the different cliffs and things that I was going to go over the side. And at a certain moment, I just realized there's nothing I can do about this. And I just mentally kind of let go. And when I did that, I experienced myself out of my body, seeing my body go down the slope of that mountain. And then I just kind of blacked out, and I woke up in a snowdrift at the bottom. Friends are kind of shaking me, and they said, the way that you came down was the only way you could possibly have gotten down alive. The way that you slid down like that.
Wow.
So that was an experience I had. Then about remote viewing, this is kind of interesting. I was speaking at a conference in Montreal, Canada, a few years ago, and there was another researcher there, Stefan Schwartz. Now, Stefan Schwartz was part of the Stanford Research Institute, which was contracted by the United States government some years ago to engage remote viewers in doing work for the intelligence services, the civilian and military intelligence services. And this has been documented. This has been admitted by the government publicly that they were doing that. But Stefan Schwartz was having, he came to my lecture. I went to his lecture. He was talking about remote viewing. I was talking about my forbidden archaeology work. But he had a workshop in remote viewing. And he said, this is an ability that everybody actually has. It's like any other ability, artistic ability, musical ability, whatever. We've all got a little, but some people are really good. But it's something you can also improve with practice.
Sure.
So there were about 100 of us in this workshop, and he did something very interesting. He took 3 people, and he said, get in the car, taxi, whatever, go anywhere you want in Montreal within a 15-minute driving radius. And when you get there, just stay there and try to mentally project the imagery that's around you back to us here in the hotel. And he also gave them a video camera and said, when you get to the spot that you pick out, videotape it as well so that we have a record of it. So he sent those 3 people out. And during the next 15 minutes, he was talking to the rest of us there, saying, now, what I'm going to ask you to do, after 15 minutes is clear your minds, and whatever imagery comes into your mind at that point, just write it down. Don't think about it. Don't edit it. Just whatever comes to your mind, whatever imagery is there, just write it down. Okay, so the 15 minutes was gone. It was time to start the exercise. The first image that came to my mind was candle flames and red glass holders. And I was mentally just rejecting it. I thought these people had gone to a bowling alley. I was convinced of it. But I thought, okay, let me just go along with this. So I wrote it down, candle flames and red glass holders. And then Stefan Schwartz asked us, well, what do you see when you look to the front, when you look to the back, when you look to the right, when you look to the left, when you look up, when you look down? So I wrote it all down. And everybody else did too. And next to me was another researcher, actually Rupert Sheldrake, who's famous for his research on what he calls morphogenetic fields. So anyways, after some time, the 3 people come back. They take the videotape, they put it in the playback machine, and the first image that comes on the screen is candle flames and red glass holders. I believe in this stuff. I believe in this stuff, and I found it hard to believe that. I ran up and showed Stefan Schwartz the paper where I'd written it down: candle flames and red glass holders, and it was just totally amazing. They'd gone to a cathedral, and I'd gotten it right. And
you nailed it. Sounds like you nailed it.
It seems about 60% of the people in the room got it. Their descriptions sort of matched up. They didn't have their candle flames and the red glass holders, but they had other aspects of what you would see if you were in a cathedral. So it was kind of amazing. And then I went to Rupert Sheldrake's lecture. He knew about my work. I'd known about his. He's done work in consciousness studies and paranormal powers. And again, he was saying, these are abilities that we all have. And one very simple exercise he took us through, it's something that we all experience. Have you ever had the experience that you're sitting somewhere and you just have this sensation, somebody is staring at the back of my head, and you turn around and you look, and there's somebody staring right at
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mike.
You
got
have
1 or 2 sentences. You break up a little bit. Sorry. Could you just repeat 1 or 2 sentences back?
Okay. Do you ever have this feeling that somebody is staring at the back of your head, and you turn around and you look, and somebody is staring right at the back of your head? And I think Amy was saying, she's had that kind of experience.
Oh, yes.
I think we all do.
We all absolutely do.
But it's something you can actually test. And Rupert Sheldrake, there were about 100 of us.
Is Rupert Sheldrake the man who created this experiment that I heard about, and I've spoken about this on the show? They had they put a person in a room in a building, and he was hooked up to an EKG machine. He was hooked up an EEG machine. He was hooked up to all kind of biomarker technology, testing and monitoring his body temperature, his heart rate, blood pressure, brain wave. He was completely monitored, and at the same time they had a video camera focused on this person, and that video camera led to a television on another side of the building, where in another room they had a person watching the television where they could see this person who was being monitored, and he was tasked with sending emotional energy. He was asked to, raise the heart rate, or, send energy, loving energy, calming energy, or, anxiety energy. And they could absolutely measure the other person who was being monitored in real time and verify that someone who was not even in the same room, not even in visual contact, just watching a television monitor, could consciously affect the physiology of the subject. Is that the person who created? Are you familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with that particular kind of experiment. It sounds like something he could have been involved in, but I know he's been involved in a lot of things that don't involve any technology whatsoever, because he wants to show people that there are some very simple experiments that you can do that can demonstrate the existence of these paranormal powers of consciousness that we all have, and which are very difficult to explain according to the current scientific worldview, that we're just machines made of molecules. His idea is that there are other energies associated with the human organism that are responsible for these effects. Like if you have a magnet, the magnetic energy extends beyond the boundaries of the magnet. So he was saying, as human beings, we have energies that extend beyond the limits of our physical body. So in this experiment about, having the feeling that somebody's looking at the back of your head, there were about 100 people in the lecture that he was giving. So he divided us into 50 pairs, where you have a pair of people. And he had the experiment set up like this. One person sits in a chair looking forward. Another person sits in a chair behind that person. And the person in the chair behind has a list of 20 instructions. Say 1, stare at the back of the person's head. 2, stare at the back of the person's head. 3, don't stare, look somewhere else. 4, don't stare. 5, stare. 6, don't stare. All arranged randomly. And the person in front has to say at each trial whether or not the person in back is staring at the back of their head or not. Now, if it's just left completely up to chance and you assume there's no paranormal effect, the people in front will get it correct 50% of the time. That's what you would expect. If there's 2 choices and the person has no way of knowing or detecting what the real situation is and is just guessing by chance, then they'll get it right roughly 50% of the time. So there were 50 pairs of us like that. And we all went through the exercise. I got it right 70% of the time. And
nice.
when they added up everybody's results, it was sort of like that, between 60 and 70%, which if there was no paranormal effect, you'd get it right. You'd expect if you added up all the results, it'd be about 50%. So, I mean, I'm just responding to your earlier question. Have I ever had any experiences of a paranormal type, remote viewing, things like that? So yes, I have.
That's great. Go ahead, Ian. Go ahead.
I've also kind of the understanding that thoughts are actually things too. They're forms of energy transmission as well. So when we talk about a collective consciousness and manifesting our own realities through group thought, things like that, then it always comes back to me where, yes, thoughts are actual things. They're energy release. Do you agree with that as well?
Yes, and I would say there's evidence for that in scientific studies of telepathic communications. And if you look at different ancient wisdom traditions, they all had something corresponding to telepathy, the ability to communicate at a distance by thought. And, so I agree with you 100% on that.
I've heard you previously in other interviews talk about, folks have asked you your opinion on the ET presence or existence of ETs, and I've heard you mention that your expanded definition of ET being that there are possibly a species, for lack of a better word, or entity that exist in subtle energy bodies. How have you, or would you, or do you consider these theoretical energy entities as a form of, or even possibly the origin of consciousness?
Well, here's how I look at it. The real self is the conscious self. And in that sense, I would say we're all extraterrestrials, because I look at the body, the human body, as a vehicle for the conscious self. Just like a driver is different from a car. They're two different things, and one doesn't produce the other. They're just two different kinds of things that are associated with each other. If I'm driving the car, I'm in it, but I can get out of it, and not be associated with it. So I think the conscious self is like that. It has its own independent existence apart from the bodily vehicle made of matter. It has a different origin, which I call this higher realm of pure consciousness. So in that sense, I would say that every single one of us is an extraterrestrial, because that conscious self is not from the world of matter, the terrestrial world. It's from some higher level. But here's another refinement of that idea. The conscious self has actually two coverings. One covering is the gross physical body, made of the elements like iron and calcium and phosphorus and all of that. But then there is a more subtle covering made of mental and intellectual energies. For short, we could call it a mental body. And what happens at the time of death, according to this view, is the gross physical body disintegrates. And then the conscious self is in its mental body. And according to the condition of the mental body, it will get another gross physical body. But in some cases, the conscious self doesn't get another gross physical body immediately, the conscious self is stuck in its mental body. And that may explain the phenomenon of ghost, for example. Many people have reported contacts with disembodied types of beings they call ghosts. So I would say that is explained by the presence of a conscious self with a mental body, but not a gross physical body. And sometimes the conscious self with that mental body may try to take over or possess someone in a gross physical body by using their mental body to control the mind of the person and thus gain possession or control of their gross physical body, which they can then use. So, but in the sense of being a conscious self, I would say we're all extraterrestrials.
No doubt. And we've all had, certainly, probably every single person on this planet has had some sort of experience. As an example, and obviously not everybody has a telephone, but as an example, you think about somebody you haven't talked to in a long time and the phone rings and it's them. Or maybe you go to pick up the phone to call your mom or your wife and you dial the number and you get a busy signal and you try 2 or 3 times in a row only to discover that it's busy because they're trying to call you.
Yeah, and actually that's an experiment that Rupert Sheldrake has done. You were just mentioning it. Your phone rings, you don't have your caller ID on or you're not looking at it, but just the ring gives you the sense that you know who's calling you, and it turns, that's something that can actually be tested. And Rupert Sheldrake has designed experiments like that, where like you take a person and you tell them, okay, there's 4 people you know, and this is all set up in advance. And the person knows who the 4 people are, his sister, his brother, his friend, his girlfriend, or whatever. 4 people that the person knows. And the experiment is set up so that the person is told, okay, at 5:30 p.m., for example, one of those 4 people is going to call you. And when the phone rings or just before it rings, you have to say who it is. And then you run that experiment, a good number of times, so you get some results that you can measure. If the person doesn't really have any paranormal power, then you would expect he'll guess right or she'll guess right 25% of the time, because you've got 4 options, and if they're random, and it's arranged in some kind of random way which one will try to call, a person should get it right 25% of the time. If there's 4 people and he's got to guess which one it is, and there's no paranormal effect. And Rupert Sheldrake has arranged to have this kind of experiment run good number of times, and the results are greater than that. Some people are very good at it, especially I think he had one case of someone who had 4 sisters or 4 siblings or whatever, and he could just nail it every single time.
Wow.
Which one it was.
Awesome.
Now, I've heard of experiments where they had computers set up that was basically the app or the program was set to, it was a random number generator. And they would put a person in front of the computer without touching it or touching the keyboard, not connected to it in any way, but sitting in front of the monitor. The monitor was putting out random numbers. The person was instructed to pick a number, concentrate on it, and that during the experiment that number would come up far, far greater than what they expected the randomness to be. They could, if just by thinking about a particular number, you could cause the computer to put out that number far more times than random will. Have you heard of that one?
Yes, experiments like that were done by the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Group, called PEAR for short, PEAR. And these experiments were run by the head of the engineering department at Princeton University, whose name escapes me right now. Maybe I'll remember it as I'm talking about it. But he would do exactly what you said. You have a random number generator, which is a computer-like machine that will generate a random series of zeros and ones. And what they would do is they would ask students to sit in front of these machines and simply will mentally that they produce more ones than zeros or more zeros than ones, and they were actually able to do it. The students were able to cause the output of the random number generators to deviate to a statistically significant degree from the expected output of 50% zeros, 50% ones. So yes, they were actually able to do that in those experiments that were carried out over 10 years by the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Group.
Excellent. Do you think that there's a correlation with water? Now, some people in our chat right now are discussing, and my colleague Ian left me a note here to ask you if you think that water can be programmed through thought or voice. Now, you may or may not be familiar with the work of forgive me, I hope I'm correct, Dr. Emoto, who has frozen water and then photographed the crystals that form in the frozen water. Now, before he did that, he had various containers where he would write the words love, gratitude, hate, positive messages and negative messages on various containers. Then he would freeze them and photograph the crystals. And consistently, the crystals were far more symmetrical and attractive and beautiful when the message of love and gratitude were applied. And further, he went on to take some contaminated, polluted water from a local reservoir. And again, he did the same thing. He froze the water and photographed it, and the crystals were very asymmetrical and unattractive and not colorful. And at the same time, he took the same polluted water and wrote messages of love and gratitude, and then froze them and photographed them. And there was a huge improvement over the symmetry of the water crystals. Now, before you answer, the human body, since we're talking about human consciousness and our consciousness having effects on other people as well as the material world, the human body is made up of something like 80% water. And Dr. Emoto has shown that, conscious intent can alter the effects of water. Do you think that there's a correlation there? Do you have any knowledge of Emoto's experiments? And what do you think about that?
Well, alternative science is a big field. I haven't looked into everything, so I have to honestly say I haven't looked myself personally into Dr. Emoto's work. I've heard about it just as a lay person would hear about things, but it sounds to me consistent with some of the spiritual practices that I engage in. I'm a practitioner of what's called Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion, and that's based on the idea that each conscious self has a loving, harmonious relationship with the source of all conscious beings. And one of the ways that that is developed is by only eating or drinking foods and liquids that have been offered with love and devotion to the Supreme Conscious Being. And, that's a practice of bhakti yoga that I follow. And I think it's kind of consistent with how you've explained Dr. Emoto's work, that something that is prepared with love and devotion and has been transformed in that way is going to have by eating things like that, it's going to have a more positive effect on your consciousness and your mentality than eating something that has been prepared that involves violence and pain and suffering and exploitative motives and things like that. So there's an aspect of my spiritual practice that sounds to be consistent with how you've explained Dr. Emoto's work, which I did admit that I haven't really looked into myself. I mean, most of what I really deeply look into has to do with archaeological evidence for extreme human antiquity. But it sounds consistent with beliefs that I have and practices that I personally follow.
Okay, well, back to what you just mentioned, which is your main focus, and we do want to get to that, absolutely, and I've got a pile of questions on that.
But it leads to all these other things as well, which I'm happy to talk about.
I often, and by the way, I did get a chance to read your book many years ago, The Forbidden Archaeologist, which I understand is the shorter version of your 900-page volume, The Forbidden Archaeology. So I absolutely want to get to that aspect. However, I've heard you on many occasions, consistently go back to the realm of consciousness being somehow behind all of this, for lack of a better term, conspiracy to hide the truth of our origin. And
Absolutely.
Consciousness is certainly a subject that I am deeply interested in. So are my colleagues and many people listening. So on that note,
I'm happy to talk about that as well.
Yeah. I really wanted to pick your brain as much as I could on the avenue of consciousness, because I think it really is one of the most important things that people really need to understand, is that their place in the world, their place in the universe, their connection to everyone and everything. That's just something that I strongly feel needs to be discussed and explored and experimented with a whole lot more. So let's go ahead and segue. I got a good question that would be a good segue on the various archaeological expeditions. Now, it's no secret that the government has used remote viewers. I actually had an opportunity to meet the Ed Dames, one of the Army's the big remote viewing projects from the 70s. Now, I've also heard you mention that psychics were used on some archaeological dig sites and locating various artifacts. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, one of these cases that I actually spoke about at a meeting of the World Archeological Congress that was held in 2012, I believe, in Jordan on the Red Sea. I talked about a case where a very prominent archaeologist named J.T. Robinson used a psychic in some of his research. J.T. Robinson was famous for discoveries that he made at the Sterkfontein caves in South Africa in the 1960s. And he, in I think 1950s and 1960s, he discovered fossils of the ape man, or hominin is the scientific term, called Australopithecus. So he excavated many fossils of Australopithecus in the Sterkfontein caves, but he still wound up having some questions about this creature's behavior and activities and things like that. So he got in touch with a psychic from the Theosophical Society, and he brought this psychic to the Sterkfontein caves. And what he did was this, is the psychic would lie down in the cave, and then J.T. Robinson would put like a fossil, a small fossil bone of Australopithecus on his forehead as he was lying down in a trance state on the floor of the cave. And in his trance state, he was able to envision what the creature was doing millions of years ago. And J.T. Robinson found that very helpful, because it answered questions that he wasn't able to get just from the physical evidence alone. And I was talking about this at this meeting of the World Archeological Congress in a paper that I presented there. And afterwards, one of the archaeologists came up and said to me, well, I really didn't know anything about that. And I said, well, that's the reason I'm here, to tell you something that you already don't know, because what would be the use of it, just telling you things that you already know. So I thought it was important for these archaeologists to understand that there's other dimensions to archaeological research. And in that same talk, I mentioned other examples of archaeologists and other researchers using psychics. I'd mentioned Stefan Schwartz earlier in our talk here, that he had engaged in remote viewing work for the United States government. After he did that, he also used remote viewing in archaeological research that he conducted at Alexandria in Egypt. Alexandria is a city on the coast of Egypt, and then underwater there are a lot of archaeological remains off the coast there. And he used psychics to locate specific archaeological remains in the water, underwater off the coast of Alexandria in Egypt. And then I also spoke to the archaeologists at that meeting of the World Archeological Congress about earlier examples from what we might call traditional cultures. And especially in India, there are different examples of, say, a saint or a yogi or some kind of sage in a dream will learn that a sacred image has been buried at a certain place. And then they'll go to that place, they'll conduct an excavation, and they'll actually find the sacred image or the lost sacred place, by, these paranormal or psychic methods. So there's a long history of of that. And actually, a little later this year, I'm going to be giving a lecture at a conference in Mount Shasta in July, I think.
Oh, great.
Where I'm going to talk about that. But yeah, that's another aspect, not just archaeological evidence for extreme human antiquity, but different methods of archaeology.
Okay.
You've mentioned before, Michael, about the ape-like humans that have been discovered. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, every time that I look into these ape-like humans, you go down the Neanderthal findings, things like that, and it always turns out to be fake or fraud, right? They not necessarily a fraud, but an over. I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but they used a piece of a bone, like I think it was a tooth or a foot
jawbone
fragment, something from and they developed these models based on such a small sample of bone thing. And also they found they made the there was one, it was Ohio or something in there, Indiana. They found a bone fragment, and then they created a whole being out of that small little fragment, and that to me doesn't sound legitimate. What do you think of that?
Yeah.
Maybe my question would be, what other findings have you come across that that would make you believe that there is a link between apes and humans?
Well, I don't think there's a link in the way that most of the scientists now involved in these studies imagine. What they think is that 40 or 50 million years ago, the first primitive apes and monkeys came into existence. Then around 6 or 7 million years ago, they believe the first, what we might call ape men. I haven't figured out a gender-free way to express that other than using the term hominin, which most people don't know what it means, but it's the scientific term for some intermediate type of being between apes and humans. So we could use, that ape men or hominin that existed. They first came into existence, according to what most scientists now believe, about 6 or 7 million years ago. And then they gradually became more human-like until about 200,000 years ago, you get the first humans like us. So they have an evolutionary picture of the physical forms transmuting one to another from ape to ape man to human. I don't accept that. I think if you look at all the archaeological evidence, you'll find it adds up to a picture of coexistence rather than evolution. I would say today humans like us coexist with apes and monkeys, and we also can coexist with ape-man-like creatures. Of course, that takes you into another whole field, studies of Sasquatch and Bigfoot, the Yeti, and beings like that. So I would say there's evidence that today humans like us are coexisting with apes and monkeys, with ape men in various remote parts of the world. And I think the same was true in the past. There were apes and monkeys, there were ape men, there were humans like us, all coexisting with each other. Now, I do believe it's possible for the conscious self in the cycle of reincarnation to evolve from one type of bodily vehicle to another. In one lifetime, a soul, a conscious self, may be in the body of an ape or a monkey, and then in the next lifetime it may be in the body of an ape man, and the next life in the body of a human being. So I think it's possible for the conscious self to evolve from one type of bodily vehicle to another. But I think the full range of bodily vehicles has always been there, and it's not that one type of bodily vehicle is evolving from the other. But to get back to the original point, do sometimes scientists extrapolate from a single fragment of bone to some unwarranted conclusion? Yes, I think that does happen. And I saw an example of that just last year. Archaeologists working at Olduvai Gorge in the country of Tanzania in East Africa found a fragment of a finger bone. And they found it in layers of rock 1,800,000 years old. And they carefully studied this finger bone. Actually, it was this bone here, this bone here on the little finger. And they carefully studied the measurements of this finger bone, and then they compared the measurements to the measurements of the same bone from different species of apes and monkeys, also different species of ape men like Australopithecus and Homo habilis. And they also compared the finger bone to the finger bones of anatomically modern humans. And in their scientific report, they stated that this finger bone fell in the modern human group. It was different from the finger bones of apes and monkeys, different from the finger bones of different species of ape men. It fell squarely in the Homo sapiens group. But in their scientific report, which was published in Nature Communications, a top scientific journal, they said, although this human, let me phrase this as they said it, although this finger bone is anatomically modern human in shape, Homo sapiens, we can't call it Homo sapiens because of the age of the formation in which it was found, 1,800,000 years. So I found that to be amazing. They're looking at this finger bone. They're saying it's human in shape, but it couldn't possibly be human because it's 1,800,000 years old.
Simply because it's older than the current paradigm.
Right.
So, okay, the current paradigm, the current scientific consensus is just under 200,000 years for modern human Homo sapiens sapien.
Right.
And I'm just curious, how do you suppose it happened? Who was the first, or what organization was the, how was that determined? When was it determined? And why do you think that is as far back as the current scientists are willing to allow themselves to go? I mean, honestly, you and other researchers have brought forward just mountains of evidence that modern humans existed far beyond that. The evidence is clearly there. Clearly it's there. Why do you suppose that they just can't? I mean, I know that you talk about this knowledge filtration and all that, but first can you answer when or how was this date of less than 200,000 years established?
Well, here's how it worked. In 1859, Charles Darwin published the book Origin of Species in England. At that time, the mainstream scientific view in the universities in England was human beings have been around since the beginning. But Darwin published his theory of evolution in 1859, and then scientists began to speculate that humans like us must have evolved from apes and monkeys. So they started looking for what they called the missing link. They started looking for fossils of some kind of being intermediate between humans and apes and monkeys. But it's really interesting what happened. Darwin wrote his book, published his book in 1859, and then scientists started looking for the missing link. They were looking in the 1860s and the 1870s and the 1880s, but they weren't finding a missing link. What they were finding is evidence that humans like us were existing millions of years ago. And these things were being reported at scientific conferences. They were in the old textbooks. What happened is then in 1893, around that time, a Dutch researcher named Eugene Dubois discovered the first real fossils of a missing link. But I think there's some doubt about them. What he discovered in Java, at a place called Trinil in Java, he discovered an ape-like skull cap, the top part of a skull. And he also discovered about 50 feet away a thigh bone or femur that looks sort of human-like. And he put the two together and said, this is the Java ape man, Homo erectus. So now they had their first missing link. So then they had to decide, and this was found in a formation about 800,000 years old. So then they decided, okay, human beings will have to come after that, after 800,000 years ago. And then they had to decide, what are we going to do with all the evidence that we accumulated showing that humans like us existed millions of years ago? So that's when the process of knowledge filtration really got started. They had to dismiss all of the evidence that had accumulated in the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, showing human bones, human artifacts going back many millions of years. They had to get rid of that. They had to discredit it. And there are many scientific reports that show how they did that. Like I mentioned, how William Holmes from the Smithsonian Institution rejected the evidence accumulated by Dr. Whitney from the California gold mines, showing that humans like us existed 40 or 50 million years ago. Holmes said, this contradicts the theory of evolution, therefore it can't be true. And he specifically mentioned the Java man discoveries, saying that these are older than, Java man, Java Homo erectus is just an ape man, kind of an intermediate. So how could you have humans like us, fully human beings, existing before that? Not possible. So from that time, they have tried to dismiss all the evidence showing that humans like us existed before Java man, Java Homo erectus. And anything fully human will have to come after that time. So that's more or less how it started. This idea that humans like us have to be fairly recent. Now, what you don't see mentioned in the textbooks is that some English scientists, Michael Day and another scientist, carefully studied that original femur or thigh bone that had been found by Dubois in his excavation at the Treno site in Java. And they determined this is exactly like a modern human femur. It's not ape-like or ape-man-like at all. It's different from any Homo erectus femur that was found after that. So it appears that Dubois had been mistaken when he put the skull and the femur and thigh bone together. So, but anyways, historically, that's what happened. I would say the key discovery was their first missing link, which may have been a hoax or a mistake as far as I'm concerned.
It certainly sounds like a hoax. Certainly sounds like there was a mismatch of the wrong set of bones. Mm-hmm. And you have obviously mentioned here and in other lectures and interviews about the coexistence of modern humans with these intermediate species. And it sounds to me like a gigantic pile of intellectual dishonesty that so-called scientists would not even consider that possibility, despite the findings of the Java man skull cap. It seems like they're perfectly logical that there would be the coexistence. Even if they did find the missing link, it doesn't actually mean that modern humans had to come after that. It doesn't equate to that at all to me in terms of any sense of logic. As you have mentioned, the coexistence factor, that doesn't seem to be considered at all with the scientists who you just described having determined this date of less than 200,000 years.
Now, fortunately, there are some scientists who are willing to listen to alternative evidence. And I think the fact that I've been able to present papers about my work at meetings of the World Archeological Congress, meetings of the European Association of Archaeologists, is proof that there are at least some scientists who are willing to listen to alternative ideas. And I think that's an important first step, because if ideas are going to change, the first thing is scientists should be willing to listen to alternative ideas and the evidence that supports them. But although there are these positive signs, I think those who are adherents of the dominant paradigm have managed to hold the line in the education system, where their ideas still enjoy a government-enforced monopoly.
Sure.
Now, you've been involved with the World Knowledge Tour, right? You've done that in the past.
That was an organization in Canada, I believe, and I think I did speak at one of their events or a couple of their events. I think it's in Canada. Maybe I'm mistaken about that.
Well, it says Vancouver and Victoria here. I'm on a webpage, the World Knowledge Tour.
Yeah, it's Canadian organization. Yes,
you're featured in here. So you did a lecture at this back in 2015. It looks like here, right?
Yeah, but that's an alternative science group, and I often speak at events like that. Say the weekend of 7th and 9th of April this year, I'm speaking at the Free Your Mind conference in Philadelphia area. So I often do that. But I think what many people find amazing is that I'm able to present my ideas at mainstream scientific conferences. Actually, my latest book, My Science, My Religion, is a collection of 24 papers that I've presented at mainstream scientific conferences about all of the topics that we've talked about today, mostly the archaeological evidence, but also things related to the paranormal and consciousness.
Well, before we
go ahead,
I just wanted to get one more little question. Now, I've read the Sumerian tablets, right? The book. You've read that as well, right? Translated by Zachariah Sitchin, correct?
I think that's correct, yes.
Yeah. Have you read those tablets? Are you familiar with what the story tells us?
Well, alternative history, alternative archaeology is like a big field. And normally, I don't comment on the work of other researchers in the alternative science and alternative history field, because I think people can read what I have to say in my books and what other researchers have to say in their books and make up their own minds about these questions. But since you're asking, I'll just say in a general way that different researchers in the alternative history field have different sources of inspiration. I've been very open that my main source of inspiration is the ancient Sanskrit writings of India. Some researchers get their inspiration from the hieroglyphic text of ancient Egypt, others the Greek and Roman writings, others like Zachariah Sitchin, the Sumerian text. So basically what he says, if I'm not mistaken, I really haven't deeply studied every detail of his work, but the basic understanding I have is that he says the process of evolution went on this planet pretty much the way mainstream science up to about 400,000 years ago or so, which would be the time of the ape man Homo erectus, one of these missing links. And his point of view, as far as I can understand it, is at that time there was some kind of extraterrestrial intervention, right, whereby
the Anunnakis,
the genome of Homo erectus was manipulated to produce Homo sapiens as a slave race.
Right.
So, as I said, normally I don't comment about the work of others in the alternative history field, but because you're asking about it, I'll say there are some things I agree with and some things I don't regarding that.
Now, you've mentioned before that we've lived together with the Homo, what would you call the earliest forms of men? What's the word you determine?
Homo erectus?
Hominids.
Hominids. So they basically, in the book of Enki, it describes taking a female-male hominid, so to speak, right, an ape-like being, and genetically modifying it, mixing their DNA with the DNA of the residents here, right, to create their race, right? And through experimental trials and errors, they couldn't get it right until they actually put it into the clay, which I would refer to as the potter's clay of the earth. Incubated it in that, then they were able to get it correct, and they got something that actually could do what they wanted to do.
That sounds like the biblical creation story, by the way.
And it ties in with the biblical creation of the potter's clay itself, right? But you mentioned before that we have evidence now that we've lived together with the ancient race and the new form of Homo erectus. Well, Homo sapien, I should say, right?
Yeah.
So that almost leads me to believe that that could be actually true, because there was still remnants of what was here before. They came here, genetically modified us to create the new form of human, right?
Well, I would say there's evidence that humans like us have been present on Earth long before 400,000 years ago, which is the generally stated time of this alien intervention. Yeah, I do accept the existence of extraterrestrial beings, and I think they have interacted with humans on Earth and are responsible for our presence here. But I would say that that extraterrestrial intervention that resulted in our presence on Earth took place at the very beginning of the history of life on Earth. And again, we have to keep in mind that according to the views I'm expressing, that any body, whether it's a human body or a monkey body or an ape man body, a Homo erectus body, is a vehicle for a conscious self. And I think the full range of vehicles, plant vehicles, animal vehicles, insect vehicles, fish vehicles, human vehicles, has always been available for conscious selves on this level of reality right from the very beginning of its manifestation. So, of course, I'm going to leave it up to each individual to make up their mind about these things, but that's the view that I'm expressing.
But because when I look at it like the evolutionary theory itself is only just that. It's a theory. There is no connection between monkeys and men that we can quantify. There's no specific evidence. But it leads me to believe that, yes, we were genetically modified to what we are now today, as opposed to what was here before, right? So that's why I brought that up. Because I just don't believe in the evolutionary theory. I believe they're pushing it on us, and that's why there's so much filtering of the news and the information and things like that. They just don't want us to know where we came from. That's what, and that's their power over us, is us not knowing who we is, right?
I guess my big question would be, why? I mean, what happened to all these vehicles that started with us right at the get-go? Why did they go away? Because clearly we're not walking amongst Neanderthal and, the rest of them. It's pretty much us and then everything else that isn't man-like. I mean, the closest we get is gorillas and chimpanzees.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's how I look at it.
Rummaging for food to building tools, and it's just, there's such a big gap. But it's all explained in those tablets.
Some of the vehicles aren't around. For example, dinosaur vehicles aren't very common today. I mean, what to speak of Homo erectus or Neanderthal. But here's how I look at it. The essential thing to understand is that the conscious self is different from the vehicle. And the reason why one conscious self gets one vehicle rather than another is due to its state of consciousness. If there were conscious selves today that had the state of awareness that required a dinosaur vehicle or a Homo erectus vehicle, we would see those vehicles. In other words, sometimes the word karma is used. If there were a conscious self that had the karma for a dinosaur body, that body would be made available to it by higher powers in the universe. That's how I see it. You can imagine it to be like a big clothing company. it has all kinds of clothes, winter clothes, summer clothes, but it's not going to be selling winter coats in Sao Paulo, Brazil. It's a tropical country. They don't need winter coats there. Nobody wants one. You're going to sell your winter coats in Moscow and New York and places like that. So I would just say that the reason why we don't see every conceivable kind of bodily vehicle at the present moment is that there aren't the conscious selves that require those particular vehicles at the present moment.
Okay, that
Very
makes
interesting.
Wow.
yeah.
That's a very interesting question to ponder right there. Now, what about? Listen, Michael, you originally agreed to give us 2 hours. Can you stick around for a little while? We normally do a 3-hour show. You're more than welcome to stay as long as you like. We've got another hour before we close the show, and I would just love to continue talking with you if you're not, currently engaged with another appointment.
Well, the unfortunate thing is that I've got another call. I scheduled this from 4 to 6 because my time, I know it's a different time from where you are, but I had to schedule this because unfortunately I do have another call that I absolutely have to take in a short period of time. So this time, sometimes I do interviews for 3 hours, but this one I had to limit for 2 hours because of this particular schedule that I've got.
No problem. Well, we absolutely cannot express our overwhelming gratitude for your time with us. And I just want to thank you very, very much for all that you have done for humanity and all the work that you're currently doing to help the whole world raise their consciousness to be more aware of its origins. And I would be thrilled if you could come back and visit us sometime and spend a little more time with us.
I would love to do that. I think you know
you.
who to get in touch with to arrange that.
Yes, we
2
do.
hours went by too quickly, I'll tell you that much.
It sure did.
But we really appreciate you coming on, taking the time out of your schedule. Is there, if you want, you can go ahead and mention where your website, do you have a website that you have your books on, or?
Yes, I have a website, mcremo.com, mcremo.com. There's information about my books there. There's a schedule link that would have upcoming lectures, an interview link that would have schedule of interviews. So, yes, first stop
Do you
for
have
people.
a YouTube channel by perchance, or you just signed up with Google Plus today? Is that right? Yeah.
I just signed up with Google Plus today. There's a lot of stuff about me on YouTube, I think.
Right.
I don't put
There's
it up.
there's an actual channel called Michael Cremo Topic, where they
People
post
do
live
that. People put
interviews.
up forbidden archaeology sites, and it's just
Right.
impossible. Years ago, I would try to intervene sometimes, but it's just the media landscape today. I think that's a false hope that I could have overall control of everything Michael Cremo. So,
Amy, do you have anything else you wanted to say to Michael before we go?
I just wanted to say thank you very much for your time, and I enjoyed it fantastically.
Very educational.
Absolutely.
well, I look at myself, I'm doing some research and writing and outreach, but there are others who are trying to move these kinds of ideas forward by offering forums of communication as you're doing. And then, there's people who are supporting that. In other words, nobody's an island. We've all got to rely on each other to try to get these messages out and hopefully do something to change the direction a little bit of our whole worldwide human civilization. So thank you for what you're doing to help that along.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. There we go. Michael Cremo, what a fantastic human being. You're a big help to humanity, and I can't thank you enough, sir. So we'll be speaking to you sometime soon in the near future, and I look forward to having you back.
Okay, I've got to see how to log out of this.
You need at the very top of the screen, there's a red telephone. You just hang up.
Oh, that. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Good night, Michael. Thanks once again.
Thank you, Michael. Goodbye.
Stuff. So do you want to go ahead and take a 5 or so and just go for a pee? And
I don't have anything to fill in the gap, so I guess I'll just sit here and talk to the folks in the chat box. I see Free Bethlehem is there. Our pal Pablo is there. A bunch of our regulars are there. Of course, Zach Juxtapose is there. And for those listening, if you don't know, I actually had a job that took me all the way up north, and I am currently, if you can tell by my different background, I'm actually in Zach's house right now. I'm in Juxtapose's house. So we have met each other, and he has been gracious enough to provide me with a futon to crash on for the evening, and let me use his Wi-Fi. And I'm doing the show on location. So I see Omaha Ben is in the chat, and I want to give a shout out to my buddy Donnie in Texas, who is listening to us while he's planting his fields right now. Allison Twists, 33 Kingdom, Greatest Potential. I saw P99 was in here earlier. And kudos there. Blue Blood Guitar. I saw Bella earlier. Jordan Rains. Thanks, everybody. We're not going to shut the show down. We're just going to chat up for a little while. And it's been amazing. I can't believe I actually got to speak to Michael Cremo. This is just beyond fantastic for me. This is somebody I've been listening to for an unbelievably long period of time, actually many, many years. And I was able to read one of his books. And it's just fascinating to no end to consider. We didn't even get into any of the real, major discoveries. We spent so much time talking about consciousness, and I'm happy to do it. But there's just so much to cover. We didn't have time to get to it all. But some of the discoveries, and I could probably just read through some of my notes here. There was a coal deposit in Oklahoma that was 2 miles deep, in a place called Heavener, Oklahoma, where they found stone block walls. The stone blocks were roughly 6 inches square, that had a very, very high polish on one side. And the date given geologically was 300 million years. So, there's a lot of these discoveries that Michael has to bring forward that we didn't get a chance to talk about. And I look forward to having him back. So if anybody in the chat, I told you guys earlier to put your questions in all caps. Obviously, we didn't even get a chance to address the chat box questions. Let's see, who else was here that I'm missing? Allison Twist O'Neill, I think I mentioned her. We pretty much have our regular crowd. There's Bella. Scrolling through. Looks like Ian had to kick somebody out. That's the person who's impersonating Sidethorn. And before everybody runs out of here, we still have 21 not watching right now, and anybody who watches the video later on, just an announcement that tomorrow at 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we will be interviewing Ole Demigard. Apparently he has actually predicted the London Westminster Bridge flag attack, and many of us believe firmly that was yet another hoax event, and we'll be discussing that with Ole Demigard tomorrow at 12 o'clock, and I'll be hosting on my channel. We're going to cross our fingers. Ian has to work tomorrow. He said he has like a maybe a 10%, excuse me, a 10% chance that he might not have to, but it looks like he's going to have to actually work. So we might have to do without Ian tomorrow. And we do have, We Are Free is here. Hey, buddy. And Jerry Cthulhu is here. So Ole Demigard on my channel tomorrow at 12 o'clock. And unfortunately, we might have to do without Ian. What is that? GMT? GMT, that's Greenwich Mean Time. That's, I think Greenwich Mean Time is Greenwich. It's 5 hours. So 12 o'clock noon for me should mean 5 o'clock for you. Because we've talked to Dominic several times, and I'm pretty sure he is GMT time as well. So Ole Demigard is actually, I think he's in GMT time as also. It is, no, maybe it was 6. Yeah, Ole's in Spain, and he is 6 hours ahead of us. Yeah.
I'm back.
Hi, hon. Yeah, UK time is GMT time, and I think that is 5 hours. And we've consistently established that with Dominic. But
Hi.
Hey, Veronica, how you doing?
Hey,
I'm
V.
Peachy. How are you? Hi, Amy.
Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing fantastic.
Awesome. Glad to hear.
So, Amy, I want to address a question that you brought up to Michael a minute ago. And I'm pretty sure, given the opportunity with a little more time, that he would answer very similarly, because I think I've heard him actually answer a question similar to this. You asked something about Neanderthals. Your question was walking with, or coexisting with Neanderthals or something like. I can't remember exactly what you said, but I just jotted down a quick note to remind me to bring it up. That you were talking about the vehicles not being here, and I've heard him mention before when asked similar questions that there are people walking around today that exhibit the characteristics of Neanderthal, slightly hunched, very heavy, muscular build, hairy, large brow ridges, right?
Well, yes.
Large jawbones.
Neanderthals are fraud. It's a hoax. It's not
I know there's genetic elements that they have established that some groups of humans here presently have that are Neanderthal. But, I guess my point is that, we don't generally divide ourselves. Okay, those people are Neanderthals, those people are Homo habilis, those people are Homo erectus, those people are, we don't do that. As far as it goes, pretty much everybody, albeit they have elements of these, we're all considered Homo sapiens, I think is.
Yes, it's a double sapien when you describe it. Yes, it's Homo sapiens sapien. Right.
So, clearly there was a lot more delineation of these groups in the past, and I ponder why that might be. That now we don't have these delineations really.
So here's something here about the Neanderthal hoax. Okay, a sensational archaeological hoax has been exposed in Germany. It's been revealed that Professor Rainer Proch von Zieten, a professor at the University in Frankfurt, has been systematically lying about the ages of skulls he found, claiming that they were far older than they actually were. In one instance, he said that a skull was 21,300 years old, although it was only 1,300 years old. And apparently this Professor Proch began his career as a forger when he returned from studying in America decades ago and discovered that he was unable to work a carbon dating machine. So he just started making up the age of things.
Really?
Also, they found the bone of a bull, I think it was. It was a bull bone, or a rhino or something like that, and they used that to base their whole model of the Neanderthal man upon. And then it was found out later that it was an animal bone that they based all this.
Well, there have been several manufactured discoveries or hoax discoveries. Piltdown Man. There was
definitely
Piltdown. Yeah,
Piltdown Man is actually one that I have a note here for. We didn't get to it. It was the skull that was planted at the site.
Yeah,
literally by the archaeologists.
It's a hoax. This whole Neanderthal thing, it's a lie.
Well, you know, it bothers me so much, the absolute fraud and the lack of the intellectual fraud, literally fraud, intellectual fraud.
Well, Aaron, it's a spiritual battle we're in. They want us to think that we're just ape-like with no purpose, no spiritual connection to the Creator at all, that we just live and die and there's blackness after that. That's their deception here. They want us far away from God, and they remove the knowledge from us so that they remove us from the Creator by not knowing and not having that connection, right? It's the monopoly of the educational system, right? The lies we're told about history, and it just keeps us world apart from the controllers, right?
You know, Pablo just asked about the star skull, you know, the star child skull.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that's a great question, Pablo. I'm going to jot that down on my notes, and I usually keep all my notes, and the next time we talk to him, I'll review, and I will ask him about the star child. So that's a great question, Pablo. Good on you. Thanks for that. Star child. I'm writing it down right now. Good one, buddy. Thank you.
And, of course, we also have all of the elongated skulls.
That's another one, too. Yeah, we need to, you know, I know what he's going to say. He's going to say we need to talk to Brian Forrester.
Yeah, probably. I mean, you know, the fact that, you know, it was really funny, you know, when I was working on one of the things that I picked up a picture of an elongated skull, and it was off of Wikipedia, and I noticed that they were saying that it was a skull that had been deformed. But the problem with that is that you can't deform a human skull and make it have almost double the volume. You just can't. You can make it twist it around and mess with it, I suppose, but you're not going to give it huge amounts more of skull volume.
You know, Amy, that's an excellent point. And I've heard that statement made so many times, especially, you know, the Ancient Alien show where they talk about head binding and it deforms the skull, and they supposedly get, you know, double the brain capacity at least in terms of size. And, you know, you're absolutely right. With a tiny bit of critical thinking, you have to ask yourself, how does a deformation by squeezing one part of the skull force the skull to grow ultimately twice its original size? I mean,
in the volume capacity.
Yeah, in volume. Yes. You're genetically programmed to grow a certain amount of brain tissue and a certain amount of skull matter.
Your head never changes from a baby to an adult hardly
That doesn't make any sense. And you're absolutely right, Amy. That's a fantastic point.
Also, it doesn't explain the difference in skull plating. You know, that's another one too. You can't just deform it and have the skull plate
the sutures
do something different.
Yeah, they're called sutures. The seams where the two plates come together. Absolutely, right. The sutures are not present on some of those skulls.
Nope, they are not.
And that's just completely passed over and dismissed. And when it's mentioned, especially on that bullshit show, Ancient Aliens, and Free Bethlehem just said Ancient Aliens is BS, and he's correct. It's a complete bullshit show.
Misinformation.
Yes.
It's full of absolutely full of misinformation. The only good thing about that show is that they do tell you a little bit about some of the ancient sites, like Ollantaytambo, and Tiwanaku, and and Pumapunku. And by the way, Zach, Pumapunku is the other site. Earlier, I was chatting with Zach, and he was asking me if I went to, where would I recommend, a trip to South America. He said, if I went to South America, where would you recommend I go? Pumapunku was the one that I couldn't remember. Tiwanaku and Ollantaytambo were places that I actually plan to visit someday. It's on the list of
take me with you
vacation sites. Okay,
I have wanted to visit these sites so badly.
I've actually very, very strongly considered taking one of Brian Forrester's tours. He has a website called IncaTours.com.
Mm-hmm.
And where they take groups of people down, and you get to pal around with the likes of Robert Schoch and Brian Forrester and some other well-known archaeologists, a couple of other occasionally famous people like Robert Schoch. So, and it's a little bit expensive, but it's probably money well spent if you're into these sort of things.
Oh, no doubts.
I mean, the money I spent when we went to Mexico, Nancy and I had 3 private tours for 3 separate Mayan ruins all over Mexico, going all the way down to the border of Guatemala to visit Palenque. And it was a little bit expensive. I think that was about, I think it was a $10,000 or $11,000 trip for the 2 of us to go do that for 2 weeks. We also got a couple 3 or 4 days on the beach in Cancun, which was relaxing and nice while we were at it. But it was money well spent.
Yep.
So there we go. Let me see here.
I don't know if you are aware of it, but we seem to have the impersonator in our chat. What an unethical, slimy.
You guys,
I don't want to go into the words that I can come up with for him.
Just go get your other account, Michael, and come back so I can block that one too, you POS. So,
piece of shit.
no.
Yeah. So let's keep it clean here, guys, because most people who watch this video will be watching it because of Michael Cremo, and we want to stay on that level while we wrap the show up here.
Yes, that's why I didn't go into the words that I could come up with for the show.
Yeah, let's not do that.
Yes, because I could get some pretty intense ones going for that one. I tell you what.
Yeah, no doubt. I got a bunch of questions here that I never did get to ask him. 2 hours ran by really fast. We spent more time on consciousness than I originally intended, although I was happy to do it. It's a subject that's endlessly fascinating, and I really did want to pick his brain as much as possible on that subject. But I also wanted to ask him questions like, ISIS, are running around the Middle East right now and ruining and destroying our tangible history.
Ancient artifact.
And this has happened in history. I understand that Napoleon has credit for blowing the nose off of the Sphinx, right, with a cannon. That's what I heard, and of course, I wasn't there. I don't know how true it is, but that's what I heard. And there are multiple examples in history where our tangible history, these ancient sites, are just destroyed, and one at a time we're losing them. And we're losing our ability to verify these sites and to go back with fresh minds and re-examine the carvings and the writings and the sculptures. And that's an absolute freaking travesty. It's absolute human criminality at its finest, and it's going to ruin it forever. It'll ruin the historical record forever, because websites can be deleted, literature can be deleted and removed and hidden and eventually, if there's no physical record like carvings and statues, then there's nothing left. So it's an absolute crime against humanity, if you ask me.
Yes, it is.
So everybody who's still in the chat, please remember to thumb up the video. We have a troll problem, and here he is showing his ugly face again. 5 thumbs down. I mean, who would thumbs down Michael Cremo? We know it's all one person, so let's help us out with the thumb wars. And if you haven't already, please thumb up the video. And we gotta balance the power.
Help us out.
We gotta balance the power. So let's see. Another question I didn't get to ask him, and I know that he's familiar with it, is the discoveries in Glen Rose, Texas, and I've also had the privilege of seeing those with my own eyes. The footprints that are overlaid with dinosaur footprints in the riverbed in, let me see, it's Glen Rose, Texas. I can't remember the name. I'm probably going to get Paluxy River, maybe Paluxy River.
I don't know. I think I might have heard of these, but there's so much out there, and I can't keep up with it all.
Yeah, it's just outside of Dallas Fort Worth in a place called Glen Rose, Texas, and there's a whole it's a state park, and the whole area is it's a preserve, and you can go there and you can visit it. And you can walk up and down the river, and you can see the dinosaur footprints in the rock all over the place. And then very, very nearby there is, of all places, it's called the Creation Museum. Okay, so and they actually have on display the piece of the piece of stone that was removed from the riverbed that has a human footprint overlaid by a dinosaur footprint. Like the toe of the dinosaur cuts right across the human footprint. So there's absolutely no question that both prints were made at the same time. It's not like one was there and then right next to it later on was another footprint that might have been formed at another time, because they're literally one cuts into the other. So obviously the material had to have been soft at the same time and then solidified at the same time. So there's no question whatsoever, and it is a perfect human footprint.
Well,
so we have a new guest here in our chat room. Kudos there with a question mark.
Yeah.
Everybody should go and sub to his channel. Give him a little bit of a. He's got 11 subs, including me now.
Okay.
He's been a very contributing chat member today.
Actually, I don't think it's the first time he's been in here with us. I think I saw him last week in the chat box. So it's not his first time here, but so yeah, he could probably use a few subs. We could go show him some love. And let's see, who else is here? Allison Twist is still here. Blue Blood's still here. We Are Free, I think, just showed up a little while ago. I don't think you've been here that long, so do recognize that one as well. And so it's just awesome that we have all this excellent support and people in the chat box that are dropping information and helping us look things up all the time. I really appreciate that.
Who Free Bethlehem, who are you talking about? He basically proved the existence of God through examining the patterns of the universal background radiation. Rendition?
Yeah, Mike, who you talk? Is that something that somebody said earlier? Dr. Jim Gates. Thanks,
oh,
Zach.
is that Dr. Jim Gates? Okay.
Jerry, the channel is
okay.
Right above you in the chat box. Kudos there. Oh, Dr. Jim Gates. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Everybody's. Yep. Jim Gates.
We'll have to look him up. Now, I just wanted to mention to the chat, if there's anybody that has an idea of what guests they would like to have on the show, anybody that you're wanting to see come on here and chat, if you have questions for them as well, just let us know. Just put it in the chat box, and we'll try to accommodate you guys' requests. I don't think we have anybody special coming up anytime soon, do we, for the next few weeks?
Well, we have
Ole Demigard tomorrow at 12.
and then we have Sidethorn on next Friday.
That's right. We've got Sidethorn next Friday.
And
Zach, go ahead.
I did send off an inquiry email to Christopher Dunn. And, a secondary one. He said he would be interested sometime in April if his surgery went well, and I don't know how he's doing on that. But I did say, April's coming up, and I hope your surgery went well. I have not heard back from him, but we'll see how that goes.
Okay, somebody's mentioned Gordon White. I'm not too sure who that is.
No, Lady Gaga.
Lady Gaga. Santos Panacci. I don't know. Good luck on that.
Yeah, Santos went FE. I don't.
No, Jerry. He's not always been flat Earth. This is a recent maneuver by him.
Yes, it is.
Neil deGrasse. Yeah, let's get him on here. You talk about how pear-shaped the Earth is.
Yeah.
So Blue Blood, our buddy Jay, he just said that Warner Warner Music, Sony Music, Rhino Music got their way and removed his Lit video for good. Wow, really?
Who's Lit video? I guess
Blue Blood. He does a lot of cover, music.
Oh, okay.
He plays cover songs and he plays along with the music as he plays, and it's really good stuff. And he doesn't monetize. That's not copyright, dude. I mean, that's just. I gotta watch my language because that stuff pisses me off. That's just wrong. That's just wrong, dude. Sorry to hear that. Yeah, Neil deGrasse, lying ass Tyson.
An oblate spheroid.
So, who else have we reached out to, Amy? And who else are we thinking about reaching?
Well, I'm going to
Graham Hancock.
I've tried to reach him. Let's see who else. I don't have it right in front of me. I'd have to go hunting.
How about Nick Kollerstrom? We're supposed to be trying to. You remember?
Yeah, I've reached out to him. I've gotten nothing back.
Well, we're going to talk to Ole again tomorrow, and he's friends with Nick, so I'm going to tell Ole to put a word in for us so we can get Nick on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Catherine Austin Fitz said to keep getting back with her. She's working on a project, doesn't have the time right now. And so I said I'd be contacting her about every 2 months if that's okay. And she said it was fine. So that's what's going to be happening, and we may get her on.
Now, Robert Schoch, isn't he the one that discovered the water erosion on the Sphinx?
Yes. Yeah, he's Dr. Robert Schoch from I think he's now a professor at Boston University.
Yeah, he won the awards for all of his work on that too.
Yeah.
Are you writing these down?
Yeah, I'm actually saving this in the Conspiracy Not folder. All these.
Okay, good. Because I need that list, and because I don't have anything to write on and with.
I haven't heard any. Barrett Brown.
So what, Jay? They said it was played exactly. So what? So what if it was played exactly? I mean, how many videos are using literally just the straight up audio recording from other people's music, and you don't see them, getting their shit removed. It's just Just because you played it exactly, even though you didn't, you said you made mistakes. They said you played it exactly. That's just not. Sorry, that's not copyright.
No,
You have to monetize. You got to be making money on their stuff for them to have a problem. It's fair use, man. It's fair use.
Yeah.
Now, when you play news clips, when you screen share news clips with audio and things like that, you can get a copyright notification.
Yeah, you get a notification. They'll say that you have copyright material,
right.
but that's all you're going to get. They're just warning you. It's like, hey, you're using someone's stuff. Just a notice that you're using copyright material. All you have to do is say, yeah, I know. It's called fair use. Now bug off. Right. This is, for commentary, satire, and education. So, Jay, you actually should fall under hell. In fact, since you claim that you made all these mistakes, you should just call it satire. You know what I mean? You could call it education. Here I am showing people how to play this stuff.
And Jay Essex, I've marked him down as well as that.
Jay Essex, yeah, and Pablo said Barrett Brown. You guys know who Barrett Brown is? I have no idea who that is.
I'm gonna look all these.
I've heard the name, and I'm trying to remember where I have heard that name before.
Ian, write that one down too, and we'll have to look him up.
I've copied pasted all of them.
Okay.
I'll go and look them up and see what they're all about.
Can you put that on mute?
I'll share their channels with you on Skype or something like that.
Yeah. Just reading Blue Blood's reaction here. He said he'll redo the song. This time he'll do his own lead on it. Yeah, man, just improv on it,
Yeah, really.
And then call it commentary. That's your intellectual commentary, is your own solo on the song.
Oh, is Barrett Brown with the Voynich manuscript? Is that what you're saying, Pablo? I mean, with the lag here, it's kind of difficult, but I think that may be where I've heard the name Barrett Brown, indeed.
Freeman Fly would be good, absolutely. And Douglas Dietrich.
Okay.
Douglas Dietrich is somebody I would love to speak to as well.
You can come. It's 10 o'clock tomorrow.
You're going to butcher it?
You go, Jay.
Have fun with it, Jay.
Yes. Butcher it. You bet.
Well, that's just a shame, man. That's just a shame that they were able to get that video pulled, and that's a crime because there's no reason. There's no reason to pull it. You're not making any money on their stuff. You're promoting it by doing that, actually.
Yeah, really.
I mean, if somebody hears that song on your channel and they never heard the song before and they like it, they're going to want to maybe go out and, buy their own copy of it or buy the album, or it's really a form of promotion. That's just, I don't get it. Corporate greed. Well, I get corporate greed. That's easy to understand. But like I said, you're actually promoting the song.
Oh, okay. That's where Barrett Brown came from. You said that Barrett Brown exposed Stratfor. Okay. Yes. Okay. Now I remember. It's all coming back. I'm really bad with names. Okay. I apologize. I suck with names. I've tried so hard not to, but I keep doing it. Okay. He exposed the Stratfor thing. Okay. Now I know.
Clint Richardson. Okay.
Freeman, isn't that
Freeman Fly?
Yeah, Freeman Fly. I'll see what I can do about getting in touch with him.
Isn't that Dean Clifford? Freeman?
What, Ian?
Isn't that Dean Clifford? Freeman?
No.
He's if you don't know Freeman Fly, he pretty much does what we're doing. It's an interview series.
Yes.
Yeah, I see what Zach just wrote. Talk to our leash holders.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of these people on here, I have a high probability we won't be able.
But we'll do our best.
Well, we can try. You never know. All they can say is, nope, sorry.
Yeah. Really, there have been people that really kind of stunned me at how ready and willing they were. And other people who I thought would jump at it, it's like you just don't hear anything. It's like, wow. So
I thought maybe Jordan Maxwell would at least reply.
Yeah, got no response.
Let's see, I've got that notes.
Well, we should probably arrange for William Farrell to come join us again.
Oh yeah, I'm sure we can.
I've got on my table at home 2 more of his books that I need to get to reading, and when I get one of them read, then we'll definitely contact him. I so enjoyed that interview, that conversation.
Oh, absolutely,
without a doubt,
fantastic.
I think Michael Cremo so far is literally, probably the second best interview we've ever had, without a doubt. Joseph Farrell is one of the smartest people I've ever spoken with. It was an absolute dream to speak with him and Cremo as well.
Yes.
So absolutely, we'll be contacting him again.
Suck it, Sony Records.
Suck it, Sony Records. Yeah. Good label.
Start my own label, Suck it, Sony Records.
So, okay, you know what else I didn't get to bring up? Earlier when we were talking to Cremo, when I said we're a conspiracy-minded group around here, and we had our 33rd show, and then I went into the Smithsonian Institute by James Smithson.
Yep.
Right below that, I have a note here that I discovered later on, and I didn't get to throw it out there. Dr. Cremo is a ardent student of the Vedic traditions and Vedic religion.
Right.
Well, I discovered that there appears to be 33 deities in the Vedic religion.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to have to add that to my list of 33 because I've got a list that I've been compiling, and it was kind of convenient that we had our 33rd show. I've actually been compiling that list for my own knowledge and information throughout the years. As I come across them, I've got a notepad specifically designed just for that to add to the list of 33. And I guess I'll get a verification, or I'll get my own verification, or I'll ask Cremo the next time we speak. But it appears that there are 33 deities in the Vedic religion. And that's a big one. That's a big 33 right there.
Yeah, it is. That's I would never have guessed.
So, Michael Cremo discusses this process of knowledge filtration.
Right.
I cannot for the life of me think that it's an organic thing.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you 100%.
There's no way that I'm going to convince myself that it's just money or they're just worried about their jobs.
No.
There's just no way. There absolutely has to be someone somewhere who has made the decision that nobody is going to talk about this, and whatever pressure is put on them, whether it be their job or their career, their funding for projects.
That's right.
Whatever pressure it takes to get these people to stay quiet.
Because they're Satanists, and who do Satanists hate the most?
Me and you.
Educated people?
No, who do they hate the most? What are they? They're anti what?
Anti-Krishna. That's another thing I wanted to talk to Cremo about.
Now, the Krishna thing is that the Krishna thing does not. That's been debunked already. It's not Christ. There was a crucifix on cross thing that people thought it meant Jesus, but it didn't.
Well,
it's got no relation It's Krishna.
Well, the Christ.
I've already looked into that. You mentioned that there a week ago or so, and I looked into it, and that's been debunked.
Really debunked, huh? Debunked by who again?
By those I don't know what you call them. They're metal medallion things that showed the crucifix on this iron cross with the Krishnas in Ireland, and it was all misconstrued, thinking that they're speaking about Jesus and stuff. So.
Well, I think it's probably too much of a coincidence for me to brush off.
I looked into it, and there was no link between. I couldn't find anything between a link between Krishna and Christ. The only thing I found was that they were saying that I found something that was debunking the whole idea of it.
Well, I just think it's too much of a coincidence that the Christos, which is a title for the Christ, was called the Christos. I just think it's too much of.
Just in Italian, wasn't it?
It was just what?
Wasn't that just in Italian or Latin or whatever? Christos?
I don't know.
It's just in Latin, is it not? Christos.
Well, that's kind of the point, Ian, is that one culture calls it Christos and another culture calls it Krishna.
Yeah.
Well, it's just the language, though.
Well, that's kind of the point of, studying etymology and seeing how the words change slightly from one, language and one culture to another.
They say privacy in England, but we say privacy over here. Right?
You say tomato, I say avocado.
You say tomato and I say clamato.
So yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there that claims to be debunked and it's not debunked at all.
Right.
Robin from How I See the World.
Well, I looked into it, and that's what they were saying, that they took that crucifix off that iron cross medallion things they found, and they tried to make a connection between that and
but when I brought it up, I never mentioned anything about any crucifix. That's not where I'm coming from. I'm coming from an etymological standpoint.
Right.
And I could be wrong. I mean, I don't know everything, and it seems logical to me that from an etymological standpoint that the Christos and the Krishna are just too similar to dismiss. And after all, we're talking about two entities that are remarkably similar in their religious aspects or attributes.
I agree. It's
Hare
just
Krishna.
Hare Krishna sounds like holy. Hare Krishna is holy Krishna or holy Christos. Holy Christos, Hare Krishna. I mean, again, we're back to a very similar etymological
element. Yes.
Thank you. Yes.
I agree. It's just too close to say, no relationship.
Somebody who wants to debunk Sandy Hook, they might find themselves on the Sandy Hook Facts YouTube channel or website, and they're going to say to their friends, well, hey, I looked into Sandy Hook. It's been debunked. Well, really? By who? By a guy who's a freaking shill.
Yes.
So, I mean, just because one guy says that's not true, you have to consider the source and then look at other sources. And
well, no, they looked at the source that was used to make the comparison, and the source that was used there was no comparison. It was just misinterpreted to mean the same, like to parallel the two. Right?
Kudos there just said one of the signs they make on TV to show a line, I think he meant alignment, maybe, to show a line is the swiping the hand across the neck. Saw it again just last night. I'll upload after this is finished. It means holy. Huh. Okay. Yeah, please do make a video and do me a favor, Kudos. If you haven't already, subscribe to my channel, Ian's channel, Amy's channel when you do make a video. In fact, I'll be sure to subscribe to your channel. That way I'll get a notification that you've got a new video. I would like to see what exactly you're talking about there.
So I'm on Wikipedia here. The etymology for hati is the Sanskrit word hati means green or yellow and derives from the Proto-Indo-European root gel with some kind of funny accent. Gel. To shine, to flourish, green, yellow, which also gave rise to Persian zar, gold, Greek chloros, green, Slavic zelen, green, zolto, gold.
Hey, I just got a text message from Mom who was listening to the show. She said, "You are one hell of a great interviewer." Oh, thanks, Ma.
I agree.
If you're still listening, Ma, thank you. That's sweet.
I agree.
That was nice. She also,
And true.
thank you, Amy. She also sent me an email. I guess it's an article, VA retaliation against whistleblower. Let's look at this. FoxNews.com, retaliation against whistleblower doctor kept in empty room. Huh. Have a look at that. She's still listening. She said, "Welcome. Love you, Ma. Thanks." Retaliation against whistleblower. Doctor kept in empty room. Dr. Dale Klein may be the highest paid U.S. government employee who literally does nothing while he's on the clock. A highly rated pain management specialist at the Southeast. Come on, phone. Stay still. Stop jumping around. A highly rated pain management specialist at the Southeast Missouri John J. Pershing, Virginia. Klein is paid $250,000 a year to work with veterans, but instead of helping those who serve their country, he sits in a small office and does nothing all day, every day. Quote, "I sit in a chair, I look at the walls," end quote, the doctor said of his typical workday. Quote, "It feels like solitary confinement," end quote.
What? Why is he?
A double board certified physician and Yale University fellow, Klein said the Department of Veterans Affairs took away his patients and privileges almost a year ago after he alleges he blew the whistle on secret wait lists and wait time manipulation at the VA. In Poplar Bluff, Montana, or Missouri, MO, as well as his suspicion that some veterans were reselling their prescriptions on the black market. When his superiors did nothing, Klein went to the Inspector General, and that appears to be the end of the article that my phone will let me look at. I have to open this. Read more. Here we go. Quote, "Immediately after the VA found out I made these disclosures, I started to get retaliated against," he said. Klein was initially placed on administrative leave. The Missouri VA closed his pain management clinic and tried to terminate him. According to the court documents, the VA tried to fire Klein, quote, "not based on substantiated care or lack of clinical competence," end quote. But instead for, hang on. According to the courtroom documents, the VA tried to fire Klein, quote, "not based on substandard care or lack of clinical competence, but instead for," quote, "consistent acceleration of trivial matters through his chain of command." I guess he said here, quote, "I do not consider secret wait lists and manipulations of wait times to be trivial matters." Yeah, I don't think that's trivial either. This article goes on here, and then it shows a couple of court documents here. or I don't know if it's a court document. What is this? United States, does that say Senate? I need my reading glasses. Oh, I could go on, but this is, I think that's pretty well. If anybody's interested, this is one more time. The title of this article, if anyone wants to look it up, is VA Retaliation Against Whistleblower, Doctor Kept in Empty Room. So search for that. You'll find the article.
That's insane.
And then I guess there was a video, but it's just a blank box and there's no play button or anything. But it does say whistleblower retaliation continues as VA scandals persist. And we all know that the VA is riddled with scandals. So
Yep.
I'm not at all surprised on that one. Thanks for that, Ma. All right, guys. So we got 8 minutes to go. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Blue Blood, Jay, We Are Free. Thanks to everybody, all my peeps. Big all thanks to Juxtapose for letting me crash on his futon and do the show from his living room and literally have his whole living room rearranged so that I've got a decent little background here. His house is turned upside down because I'm here. So big thanks to Jux, Allison Twist, and everybody. Greatest Potential, Big P99. Bella was here earlier. Just thanks, everybody. Thank you. Blue Blood, Pablo, Omaha Ben was here. Jordan Rains was here earlier. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Thanks for your contribution in the chat box. Were you guys reading or keeping an eye on the chat while I was reading off that article? Were there any other suggestions as to guests, perhaps, that I missed?
I didn't see any, and I think Ian was taking care of that.
Okay. Well, we have a few people to look up and reach out to, and we still have other people on our list that we're still trying to contact to bring in here to get on the show. And we're doing everything we can to continue to produce a decent show with decent info. So thanks everyone for being part of it. Thanks for your contributions.
Absolutely. Thank everybody very much.
So also I want to give a shout out one more time to my buddy Donnie in case he's still listening. He said he was going to be plowing his field or planting. He's got a livestock, 30-acre field of livestock that he needs to take care of. He said he'd have his headphones on and he'd be listening to the show. So shout out to Donnie and anybody else who's regular part of our little soiree here. Thanks you all. I appreciate it very much. Amy and Ian, I appreciate you guys. You guys are great co-hosts, and you guys fill in the gaps at just the right times. And it's a pleasure to be doing business with you all.
Love always.
Okay, Ian, you want to get our outro queued up?
There you go.
You ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
All right, buddy. Well,
All right, guys. Thanks for everything tonight. See you next week.
Much love, everybody. Talk to you later. And whenever you're ready, Ian, you just go ahead and roll with it. And just one more time, one more reminder, we are talking to Ole Demigard at 12 o'clock Eastern Time tomorrow about the Westminster Bridge attack that he allegedly or apparently has predicted. So go ahead, Ian. Just run me over when you're ready. I'm just trying to fill the dead air. When you're ready, just do it.
Okay, good night, guys.
Love you guys. See you later.
Good night. Love you all.
Screen share.